Okay, I'm showing 5 o'clock on my watch, so I'm going to go ahead and reconvene the meeting. And good evening, everybody. As Dr. Nelson said a few minutes ago, Happy New Year to you all. I'd like to welcome you to the Coeur d'Alene School District Board meeting for January 4th, 2021. As you can see, this meeting is being conducted via Zoom, and it's also available for viewing on our YouTube channel, district YouTube channel. My name is Casey Morrisroe, and I'm the chair, and I will be conducting the start of this meeting. On the meeting with us also is Jennifer Brumley, our vice chair, Tamara Pickford, board member, Lisa May, board member, and Rebecca Smith, board member. Also, we have Dr. Stephen Cook, our superintendent, and our board clerk, Miss Lynn Town, along with a number of other staff and administrative folks. Let's see, the Coeur d'Alene School District is following the governor's stage 2 stay-at-home orders, which limit gatherings to 10 people and requires 6-foot distancing between persons. In order to abide by this requirement, while also ensuring compliance with the Open Meeting Act, in-person seating has been limited to 10 people on a first-come, first-served basis at the Midtown Meeting Center. Public members are also invited to attend the meeting via the Zoom link that was provided on the district website meeting notice. Since Zoom is limited to 100 participants, we also are live streaming this meeting on YouTube. The board does invite public comment regarding any item that is part of the posted agenda. Those wishing to address the board may submit written comments to the board through our board email address, trustees@cdaschools.org, or contact Ms. Lynn Town. Okay, so this is our annual meeting, our first meeting of the year, and as part of that, there's a number of procedural things we need to do. The first of those is to organize or reorganize the board positions, and so that would be chair and vice chair. As I mentioned last month, I've enjoyed my last 4.5 years serving as chair of this board and have enjoyed your guys' support in doing so, but I recognize that I need a break from that obligation, and I think it'd be healthy for the board for us to look for someone else. So I respectfully ask to remove my name from consideration. And so I just want to thank you guys. It's been a pleasure serving on that in that role the last 4.5 years, and I look forward to continuing serving on the board, not in the chair role. So in our meeting packet, there were a number of motions that we'll need to work through. And if you don't mind, I'd like to start with the board chair position. And I'd like to move to elect Jennifer Brumley as board chair for the 2021 school year.
Second.
Excuse me, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All right. So congratulations, Ms. Brumley. You are now our board chair, and I'm going to hand over the electronic gavel to you, and you'll take the meeting from here.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm sure all the board members would agree that you've lifted a heavy load for several years in continuing on as chair with a lot of big issues and some heavy lifting. So thank you so much for your role in as chair and leading this board over the last few years. And so with that, we need to elect a vice chair. And so do I have a nominee for vice chair?
Well, I just want to second your thanks to Casey and the stability that it brought for our board and our district for him to be in that role for that amount of time. We've had a lot of different things going on. So thank you so very much for your service and your dedication to our school district. And I would love to move to elect Rebecca Smith as board vice chair for the 2021 calendar year.
Is there a second?
I'll
I will
second that.
Go ahead, Miss May.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, it's kind of weird voting for yourself, huh, Rebecca?
I was gonna say, do I say aye or not? Yeah, thank you.
Mine was late too. Well, okay. Well, thank you very much, Rebecca, for stepping into that role. I look forward to serving with you in that capacity. The next is we need to elect our treasurer. Do I have a motion for treasurer?
I'll move to elect Catherine Ebner treasurer for the 2021 calendar.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right. Katie Ebner, yay, you're our treasurer again. Okay, do I have a motion to elect the clerk of the board?
I'll move to elect Lynn Town, clerk of the board for the 2021 calendar year.
I'll second that.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, congratulations, Lynn. Do I also have a motion for a custodian of public records?
I move to designate Lynn Town as custodian of public records for the 2021 calendar year.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, congratulations again, Lynn. And how about a motion on appointing the acting clerk?
I moved. Go ahead, Casey.
I move to appoint Pamela Westberg as acting clerk in the event of the absence of the board clerk for the 2021 calendar year.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you, Pam. Do I have a motion about regular meetings for the board? I can
I'll
read
do
it if you want. I just can't move it.
All right. I move that the regular meeting of the board for the calendar year 2021 be the first Monday of the month at 5 p.m. at the Midtown Meeting Room, 1505 North 5th Street, Coeur d'Alene, unless otherwise posted for public notice in advance of the meeting.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. How about, does anyone want to move that the third Monday of the month be set aside for special meetings, workshops, and or forums as needed?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, last motion. Does anyone want to move to designate the district administration office as the public place for posting of this board's public notices? Additionally, notices will be posted in the main lobby at Midtown Center and the District 271 website. The Coeur d'Alene Press will be provided the meeting agendas at the time of the posting.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I know that was somewhat laborious, but required to be done every year. We also need to, don't forget, just review and sign the Code of Ethics. So that was in your packets, and just make sure you take a look at that. If you have any questions, ask Lynn. Does anybody have any discussions on that? Okay. Then we'll move on to board recognition. So I'll turn this over to Dr. Cook.
Thank you, Chair Brumley. At this point, I would like to invite into the Zoom meeting the Excel Board Foundation President Bobby Myers and Treasurer Nanette Goucher.
Hi there.
I see Bobby's name. Oh, there we go. All right, board members, trustees, as you may remember, we originally planned to do this recognition about 9 months ago, just as the COVID cases started to show up in the region. We had hoped to invite members of the Excel board to join us at Midtown for this celebration, and we have still not been able to do that yet. We do not wish to put this off any longer because it's such an important recognition that our Board of Trustees and the entire district community express how incredibly thankful we are for the ongoing support of the nonprofit Excel Foundation. Excel has had an amazing run of 34 years of providing grants to enhance the educational experience of our students. The numbers speak volumes. Over 1,200 grants totaling more than $2.1 million to improve student learning outcomes and encourage teachers with creative approaches to the educational process. These grants put hands-on, engaging, fun tools, materials, and activities directly into our classrooms, taking learning to a new level and motivating students and teachers alike. Even a global pandemic hasn't slowed Excel down. The big event still happened as a virtual fundraiser in November, and the foundation awarded our teachers and counselors 68 grants totaling almost $182,000. On behalf of our teachers, our students, and our trustees, and additionally the entire community, we are offering our deepest thanks to the Excel Foundation for making such an enormous impact in the lives of our children. We also are grateful to we are also grateful to the many local businesses and individuals who support the foundation with their contributions. Strong community support is needed to sustain the success that Excel has put forth, and our community has made that commitment in a big way year after year. It's also important to recognize the individual contributions of all members of the foundation board, present and past, for the many hours they have invested in our community outreach, planning the big event, reviewing grant proposals, and visiting classrooms to see the projects actually happening in our schools. For the enduring impact of your support, it is our honor to present the Excel Foundation with our board's appropriately named Excellence Award. Here's the certificate. Bobby, just would love to give it over to you for a second. We are so grateful for the work and the ongoing support of the Excel Foundation, and thank you for all that you guys do. Love to hear from you.
Perfect. No, thank you, Dr. Cook, and thank all of you too for everything that you do for our community and our district. I'll just echo a couple things that Dr. Cook said. We were one of every other event this year that wasn't able to happen face to face. But we have, 20-some board members that are all parents of students in the districts, past parents of students in the districts, and they came together, all of the businesses, the local companies that they all work for, they all came together and they rallied around Excel this year to really help us put on our 34th annual event. We were still able to meet and review and fund some really well thought out grants that the educators of Coeur d'Alene School District 271 put forth this year. And we, over the past 30 years, we're able to now put about $2.1 million back into the school district. And that's something that we're really proud of and want to continue to do year over year. So really just thank you and thank all the educators that are putting District 271 at the top of Idaho. So thanks everyone.
Well, thank you very much, Bobby, for being here tonight, and absolutely thank you for all the years of work that Excel has done and the thousands and 2.1 million, as you said tonight, dollars that it's put into this district. So thank you very much. Or is it Coeur d'Alene School District or countywide?
Coeur d'Alene District 271.
Okay, so thank you very much. All right, if Dr. Cook didn't have anything else in that realm, I'll move on to high school student body reports. I understand we are going to hear from Lake City and CHS tonight.
Good evening, esteemed board chair, honorable trustees, Superintendent Cook, and district administration. My name is Lucy Dixon, and I'm the ASB president at Lake City High School. December was all about community service at Lake City. Our annual UGM Christmas drive was a huge success, and we were so grateful to continue our partnership with them. We'd especially like to highlight the incredible efforts of Mr. Terrell in organizing the drive and collecting and delivering all the gifts. Our annual blood drive was also before break, and our DECA program, run by Mr. Blank, did an amazing job of organizing this event to help our community. Our winter sports are also going strong, and we have several other events coming up at Lake City. Our annual Poetry Out Loud competition is being run by Miss Scurry. Sign-ups are happening right now, and the event will be on February 3rd. Miss Blank also runs our weekly Central Perch meeting during lunches for students to make friends, connect, and play games. And finally, our students are gearing up for finals at the end of this month, and teachers are working hard to help their students end the semester strong. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you all tonight, and we'll see you next month.
Good evening, esteemed board chair, honorable trustees, Superintendent Cook, district administration, and valued community members. My name is Alexi Wilson, and I'm the ASB secretary. Joining me are Lexi Hildreth, ASB treasurer, Holly Hudson, ASB president, and Mackenzie Mattis, ASB vice president. My ASB team and I are excited to be back in school and start this new year off on a positive note.
Good afternoon, I'm Lexi Hildreth, and I'm going to be giving you an overview of what happened during the 2 weeks we had in school during December. We started off with the DECA put on the blood drive, and they had lots of success in that, and we, as part of student council, were able to continue our sticker campaign. The stickers came in, and we were able to sell many of them, and we coordinated with DECA to be able to sell them in our own DECA store. We also heard from Key Club that they were able to continue on with their Family Promise tradition that they do every year. They wrapped presents and were able to deliver them to the families that are in need. We partnered with Mentoring to put on freshman orientation, and each of the student council members went and visited the freshman classes and went through a slideshow and a few games and videos to help them feel adjusted into the life as a high school student. We also participated in a Viking Success Seminar to help motivate students in this tough time of learning how to learn on your own. And to wrap it all up, we finished off with a holiday spirit week to get people excited for Christmas break.
Our competitive drama team had a super successful month. They not only took first place at districts, but they took home a state title trophy for the 9th year in a row. We are so proud to have such an amazing program at our school, which is run by the best teacher, Mr. Helm. We'd also like to share that our very own Lillian Smith was selected as a semifinalist for the Coca-Cola Scholarship. Only 1,609 applicants were selected out of a pool of 99,409. That is only about 1.6%. They were chosen based off of their outstanding leadership, academic achievements, and their dedication to their community. Only 150 $20,000 college scholarships will be awarded in March, so we wish her the best of luck.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie Mattis, ASB Vice President. This month we'll be starting our Spirit of the Fish and All for All campaign, which we'll be doing in place of our usual Fight for the Fish competition. We have a new sticker that we'll be selling with half the proceeds being donated to the Kootenai Humane Society. We will be taking the last 3 weeks of January and dedicating each week to its own organization that we will fundraise and have donation stations set up for. The 3 organizations we'll be supporting are the UGM Center, the St. Vincent de Paul Warming Center, and the Village of Hope. Each Wednesday of those weeks will be our community day, where community members will be invited to come and donate at the CHS parking lot.
Thank you to the school board and my ASB team. I hope everyone has a great new year.
thank you to Lake City and Coeur d'Alene High School for always keeping us updated. Next is Ms. Ziegler, our CEA president, and she's here to give us a report, I think.
Hello, good evening. Good evening to Board Chair Brumley, former Chair Morris Rowe, esteemed members of the board, Superintendent Cook, Ms. Town, district employees, and the public. Today we got to head back into our classrooms, which is an awesome time of the year as we wrapped up our holiday season. But I wanted to take a moment this evening to invite members of our district to consider a donation to the Idaho Education Association's Children's Fund. As we all know, working in education, not all children have their basic needs met. As district employees, this is devastating to us. We are the natural caretakers of children, and we want what is best for them. The Children's Fund offers us this opportunity. The fund can purchase a child clothing, food when they are lacking enough at home, and pay for healthcare services such as prescription eyewear and dental work. If you are wondering how to access the fund or would consider making a donation, you can contact IEAchildrensfund.org and click the donate button at the top of the page. If you know of a child in need, you may get in touch with myself, Kim Ziegler, or any IEA member and put in a request for help. The typical requests are reviewed and processed within 10 working days. I would like to thank you for your consideration to donate towards this fund that can be used for any child in our district for any basic need. Before I end tonight, I would like to take a moment to personally thank Casey for all your time in leading us and the board. You have shouldered much great work, and the CEA appreciates your partnership. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ziegler. And thank you for bringing to our attention the Children's Fund. Obviously, sounds like a very worthy cause, and so appreciate the information on that. Usually we would have public comment next, but in light of our Zoom format, we are letting folks know that they can submit comments via email prior to our board meeting. And we have received some comments, some in regards to in-person learning and some in regards to a current situation with NEXA. And so we receive all those comments. The board is reading all of those comments. We appreciate those comments, and please continue to send comments and share with us your feelings and your sentiment on concerns that you have. Next is the consent agenda. We do have an item that needs to be pulled from the consent agenda. That is G, the Heritage Health Memorandum of Understanding would be removed. And with that removal, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make the motion. I think after going 4.5 years without making a motion, I'm just excited to do so. So I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda items A through F and H through J.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Any discussion on the those items outlined on the consent agenda?
No, I didn't have a discussion. I just wanted to give a shout out to Seth Dennison and his team. I think it was our WAN service bid award that was in there, and if you had a chance to take a look at that, those are the public. They were able to increase bandwidth moving forward pretty substantially and coverage of our schools, while also saving about 50% of what we had been paying, and that was on a 10-year contract. So thank you, Seth. It was over $1 million in savings over the 10 years.
Agreed. Thank you for pointing that out. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay. We don't need a motion. We just had the discipline data. Is there any discussion or questions on that? Okay, moving on then, we have finance items in our finance report, and our newly elected treasurer is here to give us her report.
Thank you, Chair Brumley, members of the board. So this month, there isn't a presentation for the finance report. However, in your packet, we have the monthly finance report as well as an informational summary. And we leave this on the agenda even when there isn't a presentation in the event that there are any questions over that monthly finance report. So I will stand for any questions from the board.
Anybody have questions for Katie? All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure it's due to how thorough you always are, Ms. Ebner. So thank you for continuing on in your role and doing what you do. Okay, next we have assessment and student achievement. Dr. Cook, did you need to do any introductions, or are we just going to go to Dr. Nelson?
Thank you, Chair Brumley. Just a quick thing. As you recall, we're trying to do monthly updates with regards to student achievement assessment and kind of that systems performance mode of how we're working our way through the strategic plan, and student performance data is reflecting that growth that we have. This month, I'm proud to produce Dr. Nelson to present to you some PSAT data, some SAT data, and some preliminary IRI data which would give us some feedback on student performance during many have shared is, and we would all agree to, has been a little bit of a challenging year. So I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Nelson now to start that conversation with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Brumley, Superintendent Cook, and members of the board, good evening. Happy New Year to all of you. Tonight, I'd like to take a moment to look at the beginning and the end of public schooling with some data regarding early literacy, the Idaho Reading Indicator that we provide in grades kindergarten through grade 5, and then finishing with a look of college and career preparedness, how our students are performing relative to a series of college entrance exams and preliminary exams that we provide so that they are ready for whatever goes for them after post-secondary learning. First of all, I'd like to just remind you that everything that we're talking about today revolves around our district assessment program. Our program shows that there are really three components. Assessment informs curriculum, the curricular choices that our teachers make in the classroom. Once they choose the curriculum and the materials that they feel that they need to address a standard, then we're looking at their instruction and how quality of that instruction is relayed. Then at that point, we check everything through assessment. Ultimately, we're trying to balance not just the standardized assessments that students would take as mandated by another agency. We're looking at how kids are growing day to day, and we are doing regular check-ins with students 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring. And we're really looking at growth. Today, still, we're looking at fall data. The next time that I have the honor to be able to work with you, we'll be talking more about growth, looking at how students are growing over the last several months. And the other thing that we'll be focusing on this evening is our Student Assessment Bill of Rights. They're presented to the students every time that we give them an assessment. And in fact, I brought a little prompt, well, it's being cut off a little bit by my background, but anytime that we talk about data with our building principals and we have data discussions with them, we're going over the Student Assessment Bill of Rights and we're talking through the types of results that we would like to see in areas of improvement. So we'll kind of walk through that a little bit along the way. I'd like to remind you that everything that we're showing today also can be viewable at our district website, and that is at cdaschools.org / departments, under the menu of departments and assessments. And my presentation is now reloading and doing something, so who knows? So let's try this again to get to the right place. And there's the link. So once we get to cdaschools.org, anyone can click on departments and assessments, and you'll be able to get to any of the data that you would like to see. And I'll kind of address that a little bit along the way. Let's start talking about early literacy. These is the fall Idaho Reading Indicator, again provided to students in grades kindergarten through grade 3. Since we provided the data to you as trustees on October 30th, we've had also some initial findings from other districts around the state. So those are all posted if you're interested in seeing results by building. Those were in that communication to you, or again, they're posted on our district website. In addition, parents and guardians should have received individual score reports in early November as to how their students performed. And then we would also be able to see those results with growth coming up in the next couple of weeks. Ultimately, the Idaho Reading Indicator is provided, again, 3 windows a year, a fall, a winter, and a spring. And both of these, this assessment is norm referenced, meaning that we're not only looking at how students are performing relative to standards, we're looking at how they're performing relative to their peers in the state of Idaho and nationally. But we also do get to see those progress toward grade level standards, the difference between norm referenced and criterion referenced. Let's see how our students are doing. If we take a look at our statewide results that were initially published in Idaho Ed News and the Idaho State Department of Education, I've organized them in a chart for you to see by grade level. The blue band refers to kindergarten proficiency. Percentage of students proficient in grade 1 is the orange. Percentage of students at tier 1 or on grade level is in the gray. And in grade 3, the yellow. This chart is organized by total enrollment. So as you would imagine, the state of Idaho has the most students in their bucket, so they're at the top of the list. The largest district in the state of Idaho is West Ada, and then we have them organized. So you will actually see some local districts down here toward the bottom as well. The grade 4 and 5 is actually a local benchmark, so we do not have any comparison data in there. But you'll notice if we put a little box around us right here, even though we are the 6th largest district in the state of Idaho in terms of enrollment, in comparison, if we look at the length of the bars in total, we will see that we are the 4th in overall proficiency in fall. To put that into perspective a little bit for you as well, that's not unusual for us, but our strength is in growth. In the past several years, Coeur d'Alene leads the state in terms of growth. You may also be taking a look at West Ada and Boise and seeing how much longer their lines are comparative to our line in Pocatello School Districts, which is a fairly similar sized district. One of the things that Idaho Ed News has reported on is the early literacy efforts in the Boise Valley. And you'll see specifically that comes out here in the kindergarten and first grade range. But as our students continue to grow, we are definitely closing the gap on that. The other thing that we take a look at with any data is it's not just the percentage of students at a particular grade level. We also want to look at our data through the lens of equity. In other words, are there any gaps in learning between race, gender, socioeconomic status, or any programs that students are receiving? So I've broken it down for you in this way. I have a table of results here for you from the same Idaho Reading Indicator in the fall. And those same values that you saw in the last slide are here. What we do typically internally is we start taking a look at, okay, is the sample size relevant to other groups? For example, we would take a look at our total student population in kindergarten at 43% proficient. Well, how did our males do? How did our females do? If there is a 5% variance, in other words, 5% difference between the overall mean, that is considered statistically significant. And at that point, that gives us an opportunity to start talking to building leadership, to district leadership, and say, there must be a reason for that, or else it wouldn't be that much of a difference. So as we go across these data points, you'll notice in kindergarten, 43% of our students were at Tier 1 or at benchmark. But as we come across, students receiving special education were only 21% proficient. And as we look vertically up and down, we can see that there is statistical significance in how our students receiving special education are performing relative to this particular assessment. Students who are economically disadvantaged, indicated by applications for free and reduced lunch, and homelessness. The tildes refer to areas where we do not have a large enough sample size, in this case 20 students, to be able to compare. But we can make a pretty good judgment that that would be an area of concern. We also, in some unique cases, identify students who are overperforming. For example, for those students whose federal race is not white, they outperformed the mean in kindergarten and in 4th grade. But this gives you a little bit of understanding of how important it is for us to not just look at the raw data, but to also understand where the data is coming from, and then make areas for individual and group performance as we progress monitor. Naturally, our teaching staff have been looking at these data for the past several months. They've been identifying students who are underperforming relative to their peers at this point and not yet at grade level, and they've been providing interventions. So we'll be able to see in the winter how much we'll be able to close those gaps. With your permission, I'd like to move on to the other end of the spectrum, and it's our college and career preparedness.
Dr. Nelson?
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. Could I ask a quick question? Just
Absolutely.
on the IRI data. You mentioned earlier that the Coeur d'Alene School District has been one of the top performers in the district as far as growth during the school year.
Correct.
Any idea what that's looked like over the past number of years?
In terms of growth,
Yes.
so are you looking for an average rate of growth from fall to spring?
Yeah, I'm just wondering what we see, I guess, from fall to spring.
Yeah, usually by grade level, our growth is a little higher in kindergarten and 1st grade. As you would imagine, those skills are developing so quickly at those levels. And in our early intermediate grade levels, we're seeing anywhere from 10 to 15% growth as well. But as you know, our board has been very clear that we want to see 100% of all of our students reading at grade level by the time that they move from elementary school. If you would like, I do have some of that data in the board questions that were presented to us this morning. And if you'd like me to dive into it and provide multi-years of data, I'd be more than glad to do that for you as well. Trustee Morström.
Not necessary, just curious. So thank you.
Dr. Nelson, I also had a quick question on the equity slide. That was really great information, so thank you for providing that. I was wondering if it would be possible, 2 other areas that we do have differences in access and equity would be all-day kindergarten and now our students who are participating online. We won't have any cohort data for those students online, but for our all-day K students, it would be nice to see, now that we have 3 years of data, what their IRI scores look like. I was just looking at West Ada's, and I know they have a robust all-day K program. I'm wondering if potentially this would help us as we, in the spring look to expand our all-day K, that maybe some data to support that would be helpful. And then also just to track and see how our students who are participating solely online are doing would also be really helpful.
Trustee May, I agree with you. We did poll results for all-day kindergarten early this last year, but as you can imagine, we did not have spring results. So that kind of derailed that a little bit. I'll be more than glad to take a look at that, but the data may be incomplete until this spring, where we can really take a look at how our students have grown since we've added multiple buildings into our all-day kindergarten portfolio. However, I do also plan to present to you a breakdown from fall to winter growth during our next meeting, especially for our students in eSchool. I think that is going to be really important for us. Is it something that you'd like me to present before that time?
No, I was just mostly curious about the all-day K, but I think, spring is fine, or before we have our next conversation about what all-day K looks like. I think it has been 3 full years now that we've had 5 schools with all-day K, is that correct?
I need to look back at that. I believe it's been at least 3, and yes, I will double check that.
More than 3.
Yeah, I think it's been, I'm thinking, did I
Second.
4? Or,
I will
prior to when I came on the board.
so that should be, yeah. Anyway, I think it just would be nice, and it would help our conversation as we move forward. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Chair Brumley, should I continue?
Yes, I don't see anybody else unmuted, so I think you're good to go.
All right. So let's take a look at the National Merit Student Qualifying Test, also called the PSAT and MSQT. I do need to let you know that this data is going to be a little bit incomplete. The pandemic has actually been a little bit of a blessing in that we have had more opportunities for students to take the PSAT, and we have 57 students who are taking a rare January PSAT in a couple of weeks. However, if you would like to have more detail in the results as they are right now that are presented, again, you can go to the district website under Departments, Assessments, College and Career Preparedness. You'll be able to see both breakdowns by building and grade level of the PSAT and SAT. The nice thing about both the PSAT and the SAT is that it's another measure of our successes for our students, because these measure the college and career readiness standards as identified by the Idaho Core Standards. I wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of what you would be able to see for that. There are 2 sections, evidence-based reading and writing and mathematics. Each of those 2 sections have 4 components, or 3 components in mathematics. Command of evidence, for example, in evidence-based reading and writing, are questions designed to see whether you can connect how an author uses evidence to support a claim or a point. Words in context, expression of ideas and standards of conventional English, that's the English syntax. Mathematics, heart of algebra, problem-solving data analysis, and then this general passport to advanced math, which is mostly built about analyzing, manipulating functions and expressions. These are the types of skills that would lead a student into pre-calculus, calculus, trigonometry, and other high-end mathematics. There are also 2 sections in these exams that are important for us, and it's cross-test science and social studies. And for example, in social studies, a student may see a founding document such as the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, and then be asked to elaborate either in writing or in question from either a data set or from the document. There is some difference, however, in the exam in terms of time and in terms of scoring. So I wanted to make sure that you understood this. The SAT is, a perfect score on the SAT is a 1600. A perfect score on the PSAT is actually a 1520. So it is scaled a little bit based on some of the options that you have. So let's take a look at how our sample did from the PSAT. It is important to note, normally we would be able to have some comparison data. Unfortunately, in this case, we offered the PSAT as an option to students. It was not offered during the school day, and it was offered on a Saturday, and that is going to come into play when we start taking a look at some of the data. But we did have almost 300 students who opted to come in to be able to take the PSAT on a Saturday at both Coeur d'Alene and Lake City High School. And again, several students who will be added to these data points in January. Here is how they broke down, and I broke it down in terms of national percentiles to see the relative health of these sets of results. Again, we have 2 sections, evidence-based reading and writing, which I've abbreviated as EBRW down at the bottom, and math. And then we also have a total score area, back up. Oh my goodness, I did it. That was not good, but we'll get there. The results actually were fairly strong for our students in total score, where 82% of all test takers were above the mean for the national exam. That's fairly strong comparative to the results that we have seen in the past. But again, it's not a representative sample of all students taking the exam. We saw a similar distribution when we were taking a look at evidence-based reading and writing, where 54% of the students were at the college preparedness path, 29% were in the second tier of that, and then we had 4% of students not at grade level or registered for college and career. Mathematics was an area that we have to continue to grow in. In that particular case, only 75% of students were at that national mean. Still quality, but we would certainly love it to be more equitable along the way. The other exam that we gave was the SAT. The SAT is a school day exam, and these are students who came in on a normal school day. It was on a Tuesday this year. In this particular case, 568 students sat for the exam in order to meet their college entrance exam milestone. Right now, 159 of our seniors do not yet have their milestone, and they have a couple of different chances still to be able to do that. Our counseling teams are wonderful and working toward all of that. The distribution was eerily equal all the way through. We saw a very equal distribution, or very close to equal distribution, in terms of total score, evidence-based reading and writing, and math, which does tell us that we have areas of growth, certainly, but we also got students there and we're able to look at their areas of strength a lot closer. But again, there's a lot of story in equity in these results. Keep in mind that this was an optional assessment, and students had to come in on a Saturday to be able to take it. Well, what has happened is, even though we had fairly good results, we saw about a 15% increase in total score over previous years. We did not attract students receiving special education, nor students who did not, or of limited means, nor students who were homeless to be able to come to that exam. In this particular case, we did see that our students who were of a federal race code of white outperformed students who were not white in both grades 10 and 11. But those were within the 5% sample. It would be about 37 points difference between them. For the SAT, we did see some variance, however, for the students receiving special education. They underperformed relative to the mean, as well as those receiving free and reduced lunch. So again, it's not just about the results, it is what we're planning to do with them. We're having individual meetings with each of our building principals, had a meeting even during the holiday break with Ventura High School staff to go through the results and to start talking about how we get the results back into the hands of students, how we help them prepare for the SAT as an eventual college entrance exam, and then what we're planning on doing with these results also to improve the quality of curriculum and instruction that we have as well. One of the things that we can do fairly easily is actually give the exam back to students. The PSAT is a wonderful preparation tool because of the fact that students get back their actual test book and they will get a summary of how they performed relative to the exam. Each of the questions are listed as either easy, medium, or difficult. They receive their answer and whether that answer was correct. In addition, the College Board has partnered with Khan Academy to provide a personalized preparation for students. So if a student was a little bit lower in command of evidence, College Board and the Khan Academy would say, here are some things that you could do to help prepare for the next time that you would take an exam. Email communication also has been going out to parents and guardians, and our college and career advisors are also providing webinars for students and parents and guardians to fully understand the results, what they mean, and how they can use them for improvement. So that's what I had prepared for you for today. I apologize for misclicking in the presentation, but it's my hope that it provided you a full understanding of the data and how we plan to use it. And next month, it's my hope to be able to come back and provide you some growth data for the Idaho Reading Indicator, the IRI from iStation, iReady Mathematics. The civics assessment will be administered again, and FastBridge in both English Language Arts and math.
Dr. Nelson, you mentioned that Khan Academy and the College Board somehow are linked. Is there something specific that students need to do to be able to gather their information from that, or is there a way we're getting that out to our students?
Absolutely, Trustee Pickford. So when students receive their information back, right at the very bottom here, they'll be able to access their personalized score report. We upload our students with their full district email address. So students will be, anytime the student takes the PSAT or SAT, a College Board account is automatically established for them. And because we're a Gmail district, they automatically have access to Khan Academy. So ultimately, this link right here, psat.org/myscore, will run through, link both of the accounts together, and the personalized practice is there. That is part of the communication that I understand has been going out.
Awesome, thank you.
Dr. Nelson, a couple times you mentioned just the interventions, especially for those economically disadvantaged students. I'm curious, as we move forward in this year and with, with less in-person education, I'm wondering what kind of other interventions we're looking at, whether that be summertime interventions or maybe some interventions that we haven't had to put in place before, but now we see the need to right now. What kind of things are we doing as far as interventions go, especially for those students who are going to need it?
We have a variety of different tools, and a lot of them work with our Director of Title Programs, Kate Keinert. She, in the past several years with her team, has done summer. We have intervention plans that we're developing for students. For example, when a student is below grade level or needing assistance in early literacy, we provide each student an individualized plan that says, we're going to try a couple of these things. Additionally, if a student is underperforming in mathematics, early mathematics through grade 8, we have intervention licensing that we can provide to them so that students can practice on their own. But I think the bigger question is, how do you make sure that those interventions are working, especially when you don't have the face-to-face time as we used to have. I will be more than glad to pull together a full list of the interventions that we currently have. But in fact, we had a meeting today talking about how we can make a better use of tracking individualized interventions when a student is provided something that works for them, and find other ways to be able to meet their needs. The PSAT is a great example. It's a great offer for us. However, if we're not getting the qualities of students that we need to take the PSAT and working with them through their results, it doesn't mean a whole lot.
I'm just curious, as I've heard from a couple of different community members, just regarding, is there a need to create maybe some new partnerships with community organizations to help moving forward in helping these students. And so I would appreciate seeing that list of what some of those interventions are.
Absolutely, I'll be glad to put that together for you.
Any other trustees? Comments or questions for Mike?
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, Dr. Nelson, thank you very much for the presentation. And just my own comment is I appreciate the ease of being able to read through this and understand what it says, as well as I like the equity component in there and having some evaluation of that. So thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Appreciate your time, everyone.
Okay, well, our next agenda item is CAP fees, water and sewer. So I don't know, Dr. Cook, do you have a lead into that for?
I sure do, Chair Bromley. Thank you for that. We are going to present a little less popular topic. We're going to talk about the fees that we have to pay to city for water and sewer. Two really different contexts in which we've got similar problems, and Jeff and I have been spending a tremendous amount of time on addressing the path forward and have come to a resolution that there's really going to have to be some decisions made and some board involvement for us to move forward. So I'm going to ask Jeff to present those two circumstances to you separately. One of them I think will be a little easier to solve than the other, but I think nonetheless both of them need to be brought to your attention. So Jeff?
Good evening, Chair Brumley, members of the board. I know that when you guys decided to run for the school board, that the main reason you guys decided to do that was for the engaging conversation of sewer and water fees that we get to talk about. Well, tonight's your night, so if you'll bear with me, I'm going to go through a couple different topics. The city of Coeur d'Alene has reached out to us and made us aware of the needs of a couple different fees that are going to be coming up primarily in the next year, but could extend over the next couple years. But I want you guys to understand what these fees are, because some of them are going to require board approval, and I think it's just worth understanding what is going to necessitate and trigger these fees that are going to be coming up for us over this next bit of time. I'm going to start with water cap fees. Well, let me talk about cap fees in general. Cap fees in general are a one-time fee that obligate an entity to provide a service or a specified amount of water. So service in the case of sewer, and the certain amount of water you're basically buying, or you're obligating the city to provide that amount of water through the cap fee that you pay for the service. Most of the time that cap fee is paid at a time of construction, or potentially at a time where you're expanding, like in our case where we might be expanding a school due to size. So that's a cap fee in general. Water cap fees, we've paid the water cap fees across the district. However, the way our water systems work at a couple of our older schools, is we have the main water line is owned by the city. That taps in, and the line runs across our school property into a vault that's in the ground, and then there's a meter in there. That's how they know how much water that we're using. In our case, we use a lot of irrigation water as well. And that irrigation water with these schools in specific that I'm going to refer to here in a minute, come across where it comes into the vault, it goes to the meter, then it goes to a deduct meter that basically says that this is the amount of water you guys are using for irrigation. In the past then, our water bill has been deducted, our sewer bill has been deducted for the amount of water that we use for irrigation. And think about, like, especially one of the high schools, we use an enormous amount of water for irrigation as we're watering all the fields, but even in the elementary schools as well, we use quite a bit of water. So it's saving us money in our sewer fees, and that the amount that is going to irrigation is being deducted from the amount that the meter is reading that comes where it comes into the building. The city does not allow deduct meters anymore in the city, and I think we're the only entity currently that actually has deduct meters. I think Hagedorn Corporation had a few in the past, but those have all been phased out as well. And so the city has told us that when the deduct meters fail, and they've been in for a long time, they're pretty old, that we're going to have to replace the deduct meters with a second line to meter our irrigation. And so essentially, as the water line, the main line that's owned by the city is coming into that vault, ahead of the main meter that's going to meter the water that's going into the school is going to be another meter that will now meter the irrigation water. So that's how they'll be able to read that. Essentially, when we reconfigure that, the school district doesn't have any problem with reconfiguring to the current standards of what the city is asking us to do. However, as you put a meter ahead of the main water meter for the irrigation water that's going to come in, that is going to trigger a second cap fee that we're going to have to pay. And those cap fees are fairly significant. And currently we have a situation at Coeur d'Alene High School where the deduct meter has failed. So it's no longer reading the deduct. So it's only reading all the water that's coming in, whether it goes for irrigation or for domestic use in the school. And so that's the first one that we're going to have to consider. And so we need to replace that deduct meter, and it's going to trigger the capacity fee. So I've questioned the city a little bit on the necessity to charge a second fee for this second line. And I gave you a letter that's in the board packet that hopefully you had a chance to read a little bit, but they gave an explanation as to why they, by code, are required to charge us that second cap fee for, as we split now, to have two services coming into the facilities. So like I said, I did question. I've met with them on site a number of different times and asked for explanations, and that's where the head of the water department gave us that explanation so we could help understand why we were going to need to pay that second fee. And so first and foremost, we need to consider that for Coeur d'Alene High School because that one has failed. There are 5 schools in our district that currently have those deduct meters in place. Those schools being Lakes Middle School, CHS obviously, Canfield Middle School, Ramsey, and Bora. And so as those meters fail, we're going to have to consider paying the cap fee and getting those reconfigured. So CHS, the cap fee is over $50,000, so I need to bring that to the board for approval. And then we also have a fee on top of that for our contractor, which is $15,600 to do the work and set up, buy the new meter and reconfigure the line in the vault. Some of those, for example, at Lakes is probably going to require second vaults. So while the cap fees might be a little bit less because they're smaller meter lines coming in, water lines coming in, that the work may be a little bit more on the higher side because we're going to have to redo the vaults which are in the ground. So I know that's kind of a complex description of what we're facing. I hope through the summary and through that, at least that brief explanation, you at least have some understanding of what may be coming towards us. So tonight I do need your consideration for replacement of the to reconfigure and do the second line coming into Coeur d'Alene High School. So you're going to see that as action, but I want you to be aware that these could be coming at us over the next couple of years. I know Lakes Middle School right now currently has a meter that the remote sending unit on it is not functioning. So basically what that means is we have to call in the meter reading every month versus them doing their drive-by with their little sensor that says, here's what the water is. And so they're trusting us to give them that reading, but we're starting to see the failure of that meter as well. So I would suspect in the next fiscal year we may need to consider that one as well. So that's probably the next one that'll be coming at us. So are there any questions? I know this is kind of a complicated topic, complicated subject that I can answer for you before as we go into consideration of the CHS. And actually let me pause there for a quick sec. Also in your board packet was a letter from the city that did say, just so you have all the information before you, they would consider waiving the fee in exchange for the trade of property that is the well on it's called the Locust Well, which is on our transportation where our bus barn is, and they would like to for us to give them some property there. They would still grant us perpetual easement to use that property, but they would like to do some aprons and curbing and things there. So they would like to acquire that property from us. I think the recommendation from administration would be to not at this point engage property exchange for fees. And if we were to consider property exchange, keep that as something totally separate, and just look at fees as a whole. These fees would have to come from fund balance that we'd be considering right now tonight for Coeur d'Alene High School. So, any questions about that?
Jeff, thanks for the presentation and breaking it down. I thought you did a really good job in our board packet of just outlining history and what the issues are. Kind of a relatively easy question. It appeared that all of this has been run through legal in that we really don't have an option here. It's not something that we can choose to not pay, or that the city doesn't lawfully have the right to seek these fees at this juncture. It seemed to me you've dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's in trying to avoid these fees.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, we have run it by legal. Our legal team has talked with their legal team for explanations. And like I said, I've met with water department officials out there, and that's where they submitted the letter to help explain why they felt like they were required to provide us those second fees. So, you know, in theory, you could say we're not going to use more water, but what it does is it will obligate the city to provide more water, because now we have two, in the case of Coeur d'Alene High School, we'd have 2 4-inch lines, one providing irrigation, one providing domestic water to the school. So, but the short answer is yes, we have run that by legal and can't see a different solution for this at this point. That's why we're bringing it to you.
Okay. Well, thank you for all your work on that.
If I had a question, I think I saw in one of the memos that the city had not been collecting these fees for several years. Is that correct?
That is sewer, and maybe I'll address that as we get into the sewer side of this. Let's keep it at water right now, but
Yeah,
that
fair
is
enough. Okay.
sewer.
So there was a motion in the packet that I believe was related to sewer cap fees. Do we want to? I guess I'll move to make that motion. So I'd move to approve the city of paying of the city of Coeur d'Alene cap fee of $50,346 and the completion of the repair by Etco Plumbing of $15,600 for a total project cost of $65,946 as recommended by administration.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. And so then the second half of your presentation tonight, Jeff.
It keeps getting better and better. Now we get to talk about sewer. Okay, so we received a letter from the city, and this was ultimately triggered by the completion of Nexa, asking when we wanted to pay the cap fees for Nexa. And we were aware that we were going to have to pay cap fees for Nexa. It's natural, right? We built a brand new school, and so we're obligated to pay cap fees for the construction of that new school. And so we had done some research prior, and knew that the fee was going to be about $135,000, and we have that earmarked out of our development fund for Nexa. And so we're prepared to pay that. The city did ask in that letter, do we want to pay that this year, or do we want to wait and defer that to pay it next year? I think administration would suggest we pay that now because we have that money set aside. But that's going to lead into how the city does collect cap fees, because we would basically pay a portion of the cap fee right now for Nexa based on what the enrollment at Nexa is, and then we'd be obligated as enrollment at Nexa grows to continue to pay cap fees. But we have set aside up to $135,000, which should cover us up to 550 students, which is the capacity of the school, and 45 staff, so 595 students and staff for that school. So we have that money set aside in the development costs, and so I think we'll pay the majority of that right now, at least make the large payment at this point. But then the second part of that letter is saying we need to relook at cap fees, and the city has said we are going to start collecting the sewer cap fees based on enrollment across the district. And I said, wait, what? What does that mean? What are you talking about with that? And so I had another meeting with the wastewater department this time to talk about, okay, let's talk about the history of where did these fees come from? Because my understanding, with my background in building, is that cap fees were always kind of a one-time fee paid up front. Well, the city ordinance does say that schools are looked at a little bit differently among the city code, where we pay the majority of a fee, like I just explained with Nexa, but then as the school would continue to grow, the city can charge us fees based on the growth of schools. And so looking back at the history of this, it's kind of a complicated history as well. There were some ordinances the city council passed back in the early 90s, and they were modified a little bit up into the late 90s, early 2000s. I provided you a summary of that as well in your board packet without going into great detail of all the different nuances of what was passed. The the long and short of it is that the city does have the ability to charge us fees based on enrollment over time. However, the last time that we actually paid a fee was in 2007. The city reassessed it to the school district in 2009. However, at that point, there was a decline in enrollment, so we didn't owe any fees in 2009. But that's the last known record we have of when we paid sewer fees. Again, I ran this by legal and I said, okay, please take a look at this. Make sure you feel like this is right, looking at how the city council has passed all of this into ordinance, and is this right? And legal agreed and conferred and said, yes, they do have the right to assess those fees. So it is based on growth. Where this could get a little tricky for us is, since it's been so long that they've collected fees, and it's $228 a person, that the costs could be fairly significant. I ran an analysis that I put into your board packet, and I ran a worst case scenario to say, oh boy, what could this cost us? And I took last year's numbers when we knew we were at our peak capacity of about 11,000 students in the district, which was kind of the highest number that we've ever been, and ran it. And so let me preface that by saying these are only schools that are within the city limits of Coeur d'Alene, not Hayden, not the county schools. So Dalton is exempt, Atlas, Meadows, like all those schools up to the north are not included in this count. But if I take that, we had an increase of 1,142 students and staff. Now that's our peak, based off of last year's numbers, and at 228, that could be an assessment of $260,000. And that's a little bit of a scary number. I also ran it based on this year's numbers, which we know our enrollment is down. We know we have kids that are in e-school that are not physically in buildings. We know that we have students that have unenrolled for whatever reason now during COVID. We anticipate probably next year. So if I look at those numbers, it's only an increase of 75 students, which is $17,000 that we would owe the city. So there's a pretty big spread there. I think ultimately we would probably land somewhere in the middle of this, just based on what the enrollment numbers would be. But the city has said they're going to request our enrollment in October of the next school year, starting the next school year, and then we would owe a fee based on that. So this portion of it is just for information, letting you know that there are going to be some fees coming up. They could be really large depending on growth, but the city plans to re-engage that fee on an annual assessment. So yes, they gave us a reprieve for the last 12 years or so, but they do plan to recollect those. Ran that by legal again, and they did verify that yes, that does seem legit. They looked at the documentation we provided, that the city provided us, and gave us analysis and said, yeah, that does seem like it's where we're going. And I reached out to a past district staff person as well, and kind of verified that as well, somebody that knew a little bit more of the history than I do, and that person would concur as well. So again, just information that we're going to have could be looking at some significant fees coming up that we need to be aware of and consider for sewer. And then next, again, after we pay that initial fee this year, would roll into that as well, where we start to pay the growth on that. But as I mentioned, we do have that money set aside from the development funds for NEXA. So again, kind of another little complicated scenario, but hopefully I provided you enough, at least so you have a basic understanding of what is coming down the pipeline for this. Any questions?
I'd just like to say on this one, while the number's a little shocking, I guess, this was one I was aware of, has been kind of hiding in the background for a long time. I think when we passed the bond in 2016, I guess it would be, this came up when we went to permit for Lake City High School and Coeur d'Alene High School, Lakes. I believe those were the only projects in the city limits at that time. And normally when you're expanding building square footage, you would pay increased capitalization fees on the expanded square footage. And because of our kind of short window where we were trying to get that work done in the summer, the city kind of agreed, all right, we're just going to let you go. We're not going to catch up with you on this right now. We'll kind of do that down the road. So I apologize if I didn't share that with you. And I'm sure Brian Martin was good to time this to after his retirement, so you got to deal with this bad news. But
right.
This one I think is more understandable. The water one's a little harder pill for me to swallow, but this one makes sense. And I think going forward, it's one of those where, as a district and as a city, we need to stay on top of, because as we continue to grow, it's easier for us to budget these annual increments instead of 10-year increments.
Right.
260,000 is hard to come by, but if we'd been paying 26,000 a year over the last 10 years, it would have been much more manageable.
Yep, that's absolutely correct. And, so it probably is good to address this now and, get it out there and move it forward and try to stay on top of it before it catches us like it does. And the 260,000 is a worst case scenario. I don't think it will be there next year, but it probably is going to be in the middle there somewhere. Maybe could be up towards 100,000, but we won't know until we see what happens next year and where our enrollment ends up.
Yeah, is it possible that the city or the wastewater treatment plant could charge us for fees in the arrears? If there was a reprieve and we hadn't paid because we were obtaining permits, are we responsible for those fees in prior years?
Well, essentially we kind of are, because we're basically catching up based off our enrollment growth. We just haven't, like Casey mentioned, we could have been paying these annually, and it could have been a $20,000 fee every year that we would have paid. And so, we're catching up based on enrollment and growth.
So these were fees that the board should have been aware of, we just weren't aware, and now we're responsible for those?
Well, yeah, not necessarily aware, but the city wasn't assessing them. It's the city's responsibility to collect and assess them, and the city wasn't providing us the assessment or requesting the data so they could charge us the fees.
Right, but there was conversation about, we know you guys are looking for permits, we don't want to hold that up, let's keep things moving. So it was on the radar to some extent.
Yes.
Really, at the time, they did us a favor, because as you can see from Jeff's memos, this has taken a lot of time to kind of sort this out and run through legal and talk about numbers. And if we were trying to solve this in the summer of 2016 before they would have issued building permits, we wouldn't have got those projects done while the kids were out of school. So they definitely, it was on their radar, and they cut us some slack at the time. And I guess it kind of got pushed to the back burner again for 4 more years. But here we are. So.
Yeah, and I think ultimately then completing NEXA kind of re-brought this to the surface, and we knew we were going to pay fees on the NEXA project. There was no question about that, and now it's just kind of brought to light the catching up on the other schools as well that we need to consider. And so really this is just making you aware of what's coming up.
So it was only on their radar from 2016, not 2009?
That's a good question. Casey, you might know better than that. I know from my research that, like you said, when we started requesting building permits, that's when that conversation really resurfaced. I don't know. I'm not sure anybody really knows why they didn't attempt to collect since 2009.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that either. I know that's when it came onto my radar, I guess. And I would assume they would have had the same issue with the 2012 bond projects of Canfield and Borer and Bryan and Sorensen. And so maybe it was just the same thing then, that they kind of agreed to wait. But I don't know.
All right, well, thank you again, Jeff, for the breakdown on that. And I'm sure we'll hear more from you in the future on this. Okay, our next agenda item is a review of category status. I'll let Dr. Cook open up on that if you have something.
Thank you, Chair Brumley. I think, as you guys remember, right before we left for break, we had a discussion about how we were going to come back into school once the break was over. And I think we established at that point it was probably a good idea to hold status quo, which, as we all are aware, it's 4 days per week for elementary schools and venture, and both hybrid 2 days a week for middle schools and high schools. And I think before the break hit, we made a commitment to kind of look at the data as we got back in, and I would tell you that the data right now are inconclusive. I'm not convinced that today's data is extremely accurate with what we've got going on in the system. Right now, we have currently 21 staff members that are showing up as active positive cases, and 30 students that are showing up as active positive cases, with roughly 180 total people quarantined. That's lower than it's been, and so our confidence in that data as to being 100% accurate for all the cases across the district is a little low. I do think that it's somewhat reflective of a downward trend that maybe might be going on in our communities. We're still highly elevated in the community. Percent positivity is pretty high, and right now the latest on incidence rate in the community is 71.7 per 100,000, which is still substantially up in the red zone. And I think hospitalizations at Kootenai Health, there were 74 folks hospitalized, with 19 of those requiring intensive care beds. And the report from Panhandle Health District, the last 3 days, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday data were 545 cases. And so I think one of the things, and I've got our lead nurse, Nicole Piekarski, is available to open up and discuss this question. Vaccinations are started in our community right now. It appears that about 6,000 folks have gotten their first shot in the community, almost all of those either being extremely high risk or medical providers. And once that group is kind of moved through with regards to vaccinations, then the essential personnel, of which our educators are in that group, would be at the next level that would be vaccinated. I'm a little bit excited to tell you that our nursing staff has been elevated to that level 1A as a part of medical frontline providers that potentially are dealing with and exposed to positive cases quite a bit. And if keep our fingers crossed, they might be getting in line to get vaccinated, for those that wish to be so vaccinated, as early as starting on Wednesday of this week and in the next week or so. And then we expect to hear that essential folks would be starting to be able to get those vaccines in early February to middle February. And so just depending on how that rollout goes. But I think at this point, one of our recommendations would be to schedule a workshop maybe in a couple of weeks, and to look at what's the effect and what do we see coming out of the holidays, that 2-week lag coming out of the holidays, and whether or not it necessitates a change, or even possibly maybe we see the data trending in a direction in which we might decide to do a categorical modification for any one of the levels, or do we like this kind of targeted approach? So school by school, if you will. And I think I would kind of pose that question to you all, and then I would also invite lead nurse Nicole Piekarski to weigh in here on that conversation, and then I would like to turn it over to you guys for discussion.
Yes, Chair Brumley, are you able to hear me? All right, thank you for having me, members of the board. I would like to encourage the board to consider discussing data on January 15th that would allow us to review our county numbers as well as our school numbers at the end of the day on January 14th. That would be 2 weeks after the New Year holiday, and then also 10 days after school starting back in session in person today. So I would be excited to review those numbers at the end of the business day on the 14th. Friday is the 15th, but that's what I'm looking forward to, looking at those numbers on that day. After collecting data for 4 months, we are able to see some trends. I'll bring this with our COVID team this week, and maybe Dr. Nelson can help us out with some system analysis on our data trends. But it does appear that in this 4 months of data that we see a spike in cases the week prior to the county seeing a spike in cases. We also see a drop in cases in our in our self-reporting at the district the week prior to the county having a drop in cases. And those drops and those rises can be attributed to things like a holiday week where there's probably fewer tests done. We see that families report fewer cases to us. So it's not that our student population and staff population is having a different trend necessarily, I don't think, than the community, but we are able to see a dip 1 week prior to the county seeing a dip or an increase 1 week prior. So I'll look forward to hearing what Dr. Nelson might think about the indications of that, because we are just working with self-reported data, but over 4 months we've been able to see some trends. So I would look forward to reviewing that data in the next 2 weeks and being able to provide some solid numbers to the board at that time.
Thank you, Nicole and Dr. Cook. Any comments from trustees?
I'll just comment briefly. I think, for me, with schools being closed for a couple of weeks, it's hard to tell, like you said, where our school data is at. Certainly, positivity rates and daily cases appear to have peaked and been somewhat downward in the county. And I know hospitalization is still a concern, but even that appears to have subsided a little bit. But probably not as much as Kootenai Health would like or we would like. But I'd be, I guess, comfortable with the 15th and seeing what a couple weeks data looks like. But I'd be very interested in at least moving middle school back to the 4 days if the data supports that. I think the burden's a little higher to have middle schoolers at home. I think with all they have going on developmentally, socially, emotionally, it's a little more challenging for them to be at home. So, I'd like to see us move middle school back in a couple of weeks, or maybe look to make that decision if the data supports it. And I would love to see us around the start of second semester be able to do that for high school as well, if the data supports that. So that's where, I guess, where I'm coming from. We had a comment last night from a parent about, how can you guys be in hybrid when we have districts right next door that are having success in 4 or 5 days a week, or even charter academy? And that is a compelling question, I guess, that I can't answer, because I can't speak for those districts and what success they're having, but they're open and they're keeping their schools open. And, I couldn't tell you how many kids show up each day or what learning's like, but, that's tough to balance. So.
I would agree with that. My hope is that hopefully by second semester, at least for all secondary, that we can look to move them to school full time. But I'm open to looking at what's going on, what's been going on and how these next days play out on the 15th.
I guess I have Sorry, Rebecca, go ahead.
I think Dr. Cook, I just have a quick question for you, especially regarding middle school. How much of a lead time on the 15th would we want if we were to change things for the middle schoolers? Would we want to look at the week lead time on that again, or how much quicker?
Yeah, I think a week is probably the least amount we'd recommend, because there is going to be some change and transitioning with how lessons would be designed, and I think the data would bear out one direction or another. If we still see that there's just no relief, and these cases actually do start to spike because of the holidays, we'll start to see that trend already. I do believe that we're going to need to have some time to get prepared, and remember, that's also finals week. If we were to say, okay, we make a decision on the 15th and we bump them in on the 22nd, and I'm just spitballing here, whatever the dates would correspond with that, now we're talking about right into finals week. So depending on, and we'll get some feedback from building administrators on what that would look like as far as how they would integrate that into either the close of a semester or whether it would make more sense just to potentially, if the data supports it, start the second semester in a new model.
I think finals week's the following week. It's the 25th through 28th. I guess that might be, how's that going to work? But because the 29th is an off day, but essentially you have 2 days of finals for your cohort A students and 1 day of finals for cohort B, because they only attend on Thursday of that final week of the semester.
That's definitely an issue we're going to have to work through.
Okay, well, just in terms of Trustee Morris-Rowe's comments, I concur. And like Trustee Pickford said, I'd like to be looking at both schools with the data and trying to transition at semester would be my goal, to give some just give something to look forward to. Also, the 15th is a Friday. I know we have a workshop set up for Monday, the 18th. And we'll have some further discussion at the end of the board meeting about that date. It's Martin Luther King, if we want to keep that date and what topics would be on there, but certainly potential would be the category update. That would certainly give Nicole time to have 2 weeks of data and present that, as well as have data from that Friday from the county and be looking at all of that on Monday. So just some thoughts there. Okay, so moving on then to some more action items. We have the levy election and some information there. So Dr. Cook.
Thank you, Chair Brumley. Got to get used to that. I think a couple of things. The first one is we're going to have a little bit of a discussion. I'm going to invite Scott Mabin to come out of the booth for a little bit, I think he's going to present from in the booth to talk a little bit about the role of advocacy and how staff advocating and how trustees advocating are two different things, and what are those limitations? In other words, what are staff allowed to do? What are trustees allowed to do? And then the second part of that is we would like to get the board's consideration on the levy ballot language. So I'm going to turn this over to Scott Mabin and have him start that first part of the conversation about it, and just having a discussion around trustees' roles and how they fit into what the next steps look like in the levy presentations as the election comes in March.
Good evening. This is bizarre. I feel like a professional gamer or something in here. Good evening, Chair Brumley, Superintendent Cook, and members of the board. As you prepare this evening to vote on a resolution to approve ballot language that will renew our 2-year operating levy, we would like to revisit what state law says about the role of school board members as well as district employees in supporting or opposing ballot measures. And all of this is outlined in a state law from 2018 titled the Public Integrity in Elections Act. And that law prohibits public funds, resources, or property from being used to advocate for or against a candidate or a ballot measure. And so this means that district employees, as well as you, the trustees of our district, may not spend public funds or use public property or resources to advocate for passage of our levy. And this would include any use of district communications or statements that you may make during a board meeting or at any event that would be organized or sponsored by the school district. So it's also important to note that this law recognizes that each of you may personally campaign or advocate for passage of the levy, as well as contribute your own money for that cause. The statute makes clear that nothing in this law shall prohibit a public official from speaking, campaigning, contributing personal money or otherwise exercising your First Amendment rights for political purposes. Again, provided that no public funds are used to support you in that activity. And again, this would also apply to all district employees. So we visited this issue during our last levy election in 2019. And at that time, we reinforced with our staff that employees may exercise their free speech rights, including campaigning for or against the levy if they so choose, as long as their efforts do not use any public funds, property, or resources. And at a minimum, that means that their advocacy efforts always should be done outside of normal working hours, off of school grounds, off of district property of any type, and without the use or aid of any district resources. Again, that could include phones, email, computers, photocopiers, phone lists, any of it. So we again will remind district staff of these parameters as we now enter the period where we will communicate with our employees and our community about the levy renewal coming up on the March 9th ballot. And that concludes my update.
Thank you, Scott. So you all have in your packet the resolution 20-21-007. Does anyone have questions about the resolution? Look at Scott put it up there for us. Okay, so at this point we would need a motion to approve resolution 20-21-007 as presented.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, is there any further discussion? And just as a recap, this was a topic we had last month where we talked about what did we want to bring to the voters in terms of asking for support of the school district through another supplemental levy that lasts for 2 years. And this board agreed and decided that we would not increase a levy ask, nor would we decrease it, but we would keep it the same at the $20 million. And so this resolution outlines what would be on the ballot come March 9 of 2021. So not hearing any further questions or discussions. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. All right, next up, policies for action. So last month, we had some policies in our board packet for review. Is there, Dr. Cook, do you have anybody that's going to present on these at all, or is this just for us to take?
No, Chair Brumley, there's not any presentations. I think we're available to answer any questions any trustees may have regarding any one of the three of these. If you saw in the board packet, there was a little bit of public comment received, and we addressed those in the packet. So we would stand for questions if we have any.
All right. Any trustees have questions? Do I have a motion to approve policies? Let me see, I don't know if there's a motion in the... I don't see. Oh, there it is. Just a motion to approve the policies as presented, but I can outline them. The policy 3270, 3270P, policy 8160, and policy 8170P.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. And now we just have some information items. Dr. Cook, give us some information on graduation requirements and updates.
Thank you, Chair Brumley. First off, this is a conversation that goes back quite some time. In fact, over a year, in which we kind of just started digging into the possibility of modifying our graduation requirements for our high schools, and even as to preclude the conversation about aligning high school schedules. In some regards, the first thing we decided would be much more responsive to do would be to have a discussion about whether or not we agreed on our graduation requirements. And so I am here to introduce Kelly Nichols, our Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education, to kind of talk about those next steps and a very aggressive timeline that she says she's ready to commit to, and that they feel like they can get some action turned. That is, and remember, this is a driver of the conversation. That takes us all the way back to the curricular audit, in which one of the things that was stated out very clearly is that the district should be more responsive in trying to develop a common set of high school schedules in which that we deliver upon whatever the goals of the district might be. And so she's going to give a little bit of an update to that today, and a little discussion on what those graduation requirements look like and how those align to the work that we'd be doing in the very near future as we start to move from graduation requirements into the high school schedules discussion. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Nichols at this point and let her provide you a presentation.
Dr. Cook, Chair Brumley, Board of Trustees. I'm unsure if I need to share my screen for the presentation. So let me start there. I wanted to, I'm speaking to you as a representative of the committee. So I want to make sure that I ask for forgiveness if I misrepresent anything that the committee has come up with, but the point of this presentation is just kind of share an update with you about where our committee is leaning in regards to graduation requirements, some excitement about where we're heading and what's to come for our kids, and to ensure that we can meet this ambitious timeline, although I do want to chalk up the fact that it is a very ambitious timeline and it might need to be extended, and what that means for our timeline that we decided upon earlier. So let me get my screen shared here. Sorry, guys. Okay, are we good? Oops. No. Okay, so this is a brief presentation. I'll try to be explicit and specific for your enjoyment and to make us have an opportunity to have an evening. So first and foremost, we are working with a committee of stakeholders from both comprehensive high schools as well as some central office and partners. So like Kobe from K-Tech are part of our high school alignment committee. And we started our process really focusing on graduation requirements. So what I wanted to ensure was that we were prioritizing what our students and what they need and what we want to be able to provide for them in response to the audit, also in response to our portrait of a graduate, and also in preparation for the future of our community and the future of our country. So just really ensuring that we have the center and integral elements for our students. And that would be rooted in graduation requirements. Focusing on graduation requirements also provides us the context necessary to know the best type of schedule design. So we'll kind of talk about that, but what we really wanted to ensure was the heart and the meat of the work, and not so much the container. So we've spent a couple of months really digging into what do we want learning experiences to be for our students, what do our students want for themselves, and essentially what we have established as a committee is the integral learning experiences for all students in Coeur d'Alene, and that they would have explicit, they would have meaning for our students in a way that says, I know what I have as available to me as a student in a Coeur d'Alene high school. I know why that's available to me, why it's significant, whether it's for college and career readiness, for opportunities for emphasis in areas of exploration and deeper learning, and why that matters to me personally. So there's a sense of meaningfulness and relevancy, and students and families are very well aware of what opportunities are provided for them, why those opportunities matter, and how explicitly students can navigate those opportunities to make the most out of their high school experience and preparation for whatever they want to do beyond being a student in Coeur d'Alene. So some specifics around that is making sure that our alignment of credits and standards are to the portrait of a graduate. So there's a clear through line for all students knowing their competencies around our portrait of a graduate and course offerings and content standards, so there's no conflict in making sure that we develop these dimensions in them and have an opportunity for real significant growth and reflection around those dimensions of the portrait, but that is also keenly connected to the work that they're doing in classrooms. Also, we want them to have joy and love and belonging, that they're cared for, whole child opportunities for them to know that they're not just a test score or a metric or part of a competitive genre, that they are really students that are cared for and known and nurtured, and that they have fun and they enjoy being a student. We also wanted to have an emphasis on opportunities such as specific pathways. When we think about CTE pathways, opportunities for emphasis and focus areas in content or in exploration around electives, and then also opportunities for experiential connections, so partnerships, internships, apprenticeships, mentorships. So just ensuring that the high school experience can go beyond the high school building and is really part of a community effort and partnership. Also, we wanted to ensure a focus on wellness, the well-being and wellness of students, and that students have agency, ownership, and resilience, and that's emphasized in the way that they navigate their high school experience, the opportunities that are provided to them in their high school experience, and how they get to select the way in which they experience their high school experience. So in addition, just to kind of emphasize this idea around student choice and access priorities, so what we really wanted to make sure occurs for all students in Coeur d'Alene is an opportunity for them to have choices. So we didn't choose any reference around let's expand requirements. What we wanted to do was create more opportunities in which students can meet those requirements. So we wanted to, what we want to do is create schedules that provide options for credit attainment, and that students have multiple ways in which they can earn those credit requirements to graduate. We also want to ensure that students have an ownership of the scheduling process and are very well aware, students and families are very well aware of what opportunities are available, and knowing that earlier than like later, right? So how do we really navigate and work with our college and career advisors, middle school 4-year planning, possibly the idea of 7-year planning, to expand what all the opportunities are for a secondary pathway, so for students to make sure that they're making the best decisions based on their interests and needs and wants for whatever their post-secondary goals are. We also want to encourage personalized learning options. So that's something a little bit down the line, but what ways can students have more personalized access to curriculum and content, and make sure that there's consistent criteria around that so that there could be some more flexibility for students to really personalize their learning journey as high schoolers. And then also looking at ideas for creating emphasis in with a possible specialized diploma and or an extended transcript. So how do we highlight the expertise and goals of our students and their competencies beyond just a GPA and credit attainment, but what ways can we really tell the story of their significance and brilliance that makes them a more competitive applicant in a college application, makes them a robust applicant for jobs, and also really shows an area of expertise or specialization with a diploma. And that kind of leads us to this idea of time, right? So the schedule. So we're going to start focusing on that after we wrap up our conversations and context around our graduation requirements. And so I just kind of wanted to check in with you guys around how we're visioning our time and how we're going to design time, so that what we're really looking for in our future schedule is a schedule that facilitates those integral learning experiences. So ensuring that we are containing students in times and flexibilities that really honors the consideration of differentiated learning needs, schedule preferences based on different students' personalized journeys and wants and points of access that they might have. Also really thinking about developmental needs, so a 9th grade experience versus a 12th grade experience. So we really want to make sure that that the way that we have a schedule is supportive and flexible to empower those types of experiences. We also want to make sure that it is honor of opportunities for deeper learning, so longer term periods or opportunities for interdisciplinary blocks, or opportunities as well for longer term staff learning. So we want to ensure that the learning possibilities within the school day is not only just representative for students, but also for staff. So how can we have more robust professional development, collaboration, learning walks, acceleration of learning, team teaching, all those kinds of things. So really hoping that we can have a flexible schedule around that time. And then what we also want to ensure is that our schedule does not compromise access for students to take classes in partner facilities. So we don't want a schedule that prohibits students from going to K-Tech or taking other college courses or accessing any other opportunities that they would have. So we want to make sure that we're flexible, but not too much out of the work, so that our students can access all that they need to and want to as secondary students. So all that, here we are in our timeline. So we have, right now we have feedback requests going out to schools. So our committee has shared what we've discussed, our integral learnings, how we want to create options, our key areas for focus, and they're getting feedback from their colleagues. We're also getting feedback from our student advisory group. So we want to see like how that's sitting and ideas that we can further contemplate. We're hoping to formalize that this month. And then we'll start the schedule design in February. Again, there's been some schedule work that's already occurred, so we're hopeful, if the stars align, for us to be able to build upon that and utilize schedules that we're already aware of, and also some new schedules that we've been able to see, or even the possibility of customizing our own schedule for our district. But we'll start that design process in February, and then start looping in stakeholder feedback, which of course stakeholders incorporated of community partnerships, so not just stakeholders in terms of our schools, but a larger robust community feedback, and then based on that have a revision and formalization in April that would then be able to be available for full public comment, and hoping that we can propose something more formalized in May. So that is a really quick timeline. If all the stars align, we can do it. It's going to be awesome. If they don't, and we find some hiccups, or we're really struggling to come to consensus around a specific schedule, or just ensuring what we can honor and see through with our stakeholders, then we will have to push that back. But I also want it on your radar that if we push back that process, then we might need to push back the rollout, just to ensure that we have sufficient time to prepare and plan and coordinate our schools for a new schedule. So it depends on how far it was pushed back, but it might impact the entire timeline. So right now we have graduation requirements beginning with our current freshman class that will start next fall in 2021, and then our new schedule would start fall 2022. But that's based on knowing what our schedule is going to be, and the needs for professional development and preparation by that fall of 2021. So that gives us a full year to really work on that. But if we don't have a schedule based on however many months it pushes us back, it might push us back a year for implementation. So just kind of wanted that on your radar as well. But I'm putting it out into the universe that we're going to get it done. So I'm just going to stay there. Any questions?
I don't have any questions. Rebecca.
Yeah, I guess Kelly, if you were to go back to just the maybe the integral learning experiences slide there, I do have a couple of questions. And as you as a team and committee came up with these, can you tell me more about how you use the portrait of a graduate beyond just that first bullet to kind of inform?
Yeah, so we did like a crosswalk and analysis with our portrait of a graduate. So we sent out the portrait of a graduate information to our committee and asked them to think through what would be learning experiences necessary in order for students to be able to demonstrate outcomes around these competencies in our portrait. And we did that in a variety of ways. So about 2 months of meetings, we focused on the portrait of a graduate, kind of crosswalked it with our current graduation requirements, crosswalked it with the integral learning experiences we want, and also analyzed it in senses of not just course offerings, but learning experiences and opportunities that students would have to ensure that they could be able to demonstrate competency in our portrait dimensions.
Okay, thanks. As I guess just one comment then. First of all, thanks for being aggressive. Moving things forward and that type of thing. I appreciate that. I think as we begin to roll it out though to stakeholders, even more so just in the community, the more even just the language can come directly, not just from the one-page portrait of a graduate, but all the different pieces. I'd like to see even maybe a stronger emphasis on some of the language that's already in there, so that language ties together. Even more, I think we could probably lean even heavier just on this. I just want to see the work that was done, especially on all of that, really reflected. This is such a big, huge step for the district, and we did all that work on the portrait that the more we can even emphasize that in the changes that we're moving forward, I think is just really gonna strengthen overall, where we're headed as a district. And so I would encourage maybe some even stronger portrait emphasis throughout.
Careful what you ask for, Trustee Smith, because we are formalizing a lot around our portrait of a graduate and coming up with K-12 indicators and really being explicit with students in terms of student-led conferences. We have a lot of ideas to really create a very clear through line with our portrait. And so that will be a key driver, key terminology. We'll be running around drinking the Kool-Aid of portrait of a graduate K-12. So I'm excited for that type of connection. And you're right, it is absolutely necessary. If this is really what the North Star is, then everything has to be very seamless with that.
Yeah, thank you. Bring it on. Bring it on, Kelly. We want to see it. So
I'll remember that.
Just to clarify, obviously alignment to state standards as well.
Oh,
and
yeah.
State requirements, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't see it on the list.
I know. We're not changing any of this. So all the state requirements are yes.
All right.
And yeah, we're just focusing on how to have a robust and rigorous and meaningful experience for students to be able to meet those benchmarks and requirements.
I think as we start moving it forward to the public and kind of share that work, it'll be important how we communicate that and the language we use, because I can get kind of glossy-eyed a little bit in some of the education jargon that I know you all talk every day, but I don't. And so sometimes I feel a little lost during that presentation. But, I think it's just important that we use language that we're all speaking the same language. As we roll that out to our parents and our students, because some of that, they're going to say, what the heck are they talking about? So, thank you.
Trustee Morris-Rowe, if I might, I would tell you that as we were talking about bringing this kind of discussion back to center and bringing the portrait of a graduate kind of back to as a driver of decision making, one of the things that Scott and I even found was we felt like it might be time to level up even some of the stuff we have on our webpage. We've got a lot of really powerful work that needs to probably become more public, and making sure that all of these decisions that align the work that Kelly's team is leading right now is specific to the outcomes of deliverables on the portrait of a graduate, and making sure that each one of those lives in those decisions and being explicitly clear how that's connected. And I think that's good feedback for us to remember, and to make sure that that it's easy for folks to find, so that there's no question about how we're doing that. And I think maybe we've been a little remiss. I think we've been focused so much on trying to get this kind of pandemic learning environment navigated that maybe it's time now for us to really drive deeply back into getting that back out in front of folks. We had so many people spend so many hours, including lots and lots, hundreds of community members who are deeply invested in that and want to see that for their students and their children, that making it front and center and available on our webpage so that it's very clear makes it an easy attachment for folks, and so there is no confusion in that regard.
Thank you, Dr. Cook, for that. I'd love to see that. It was difficult to find even some portrait stuff today as I was looking for it online, so that would be excellent.
Okay, well, Kelly, thank you very much for your time this evening and for your presentation. And so that then leads into a 2017 bond funds and update. Dr. Cook.
Thank you, Chair Brumley. This is good news. This is actually really good news that Jeff gets to talk to you a little bit about, and I think Katie's going to pitch a little backup for him in this. But I think generally I'll just summarize the good news and let him go into details. First of all, we've delivered upon everything as hoped for in the 2017 bond, and we still have a little bit of money left over. And what Jeff is going to present to you is, first of all, what the things are that were cut from the bond project. So those are on your record, and you're reminded of those. And then secondly, a little bit of discussion about what our needs are and what we've got left over in the bond project funds. You know, each of the projects had their own contingencies. And then secondly, we also earned a little bit of interest on the money that we had in the bond. That's all accounted for. And we'll present that information to you tonight, and then maybe talk a little bit about how we might want to best see this money spent, and just kind of talk about, the good news is that yes, there's money available. The bad news is we can spend this money and a whole lot more in a lot of different ways. So maybe just having that conversation started tonight is what I'd like to have Jeff present to you. So Jeff.
Yeah, good evening again. I actually get something a little more exciting to talk about than sewer this time. And as Dr. Cook mentioned, this really is a celebration. So, remember in 2017, we passed the $35 million bond that allowed us to do a lot of work on quite a few different schools. And we've substantially completed all of the work, and there is a little bit of money left over. And we're just going to run through and highlight a few of the things that we're able to accomplish with that bond money. Okay, so for starters, I think one of the really big celebrations is the land acquisition of the 40 acres off of Hutter that we were able to acquire. So there was $1 million that was allocated from that bond fund for the purchase of that property. And we found that property, it came in a little bit over the $1 million, but we were able to use $200,000 from School Plus funds to complete the purchase of that property. And that's going to be a huge asset to the school district portfolio for future consideration. Another project that we were able to complete was Dalton Elementary. They received an addition and a lot of upgrades to that school. And the original budget was a little over $3 million, and we brought that project in under budget at $2.9 million. There were, however, some alternates that were not accepted, and just to highlight those as we want to consider for future consideration, there was some HVAC systems on a couple of the wings. There was some TPO roofing that we were not able to do, and there were a couple basketball hoops that we opted not to do as well from that project. Fernand Elementary received an overhaul on their bus loop. It was torn out and completely redone, and that was a $340,000 budget. We brought that one in at $332,000. Hayden Meadows was a new gym floor, so we completely redid the gym. For anybody that's been in that gym, it was carpet and it was really nasty and ugly, but we were able to provide them a really nice gym in there. And again, we brought that one in under budget and had a $95,000 budget going in, and final costs were $73,000. The Northwest Expedition Academy, new construction. I think this was something that is really worth stopping for a minute and just celebrating what we're able to accomplish with this project. We brought this project in on time and under budget in the year of a pandemic, and I think that's really quite a remarkable feat. If you look at the numbers, the original budget compared to the final cost does show that it was over budget, but we knew that when it came in, the bids were higher. And so when I say we came in under budget, we did that off of the approved budget, and we borrowed some funds from previous contingency, plus we knew we had some bond interest. So if you recall back to some of those previous meetings when we were considering the budgets for this project specifically, we knew that it was going to come in over the initial allocated budget of what we had in the bond, but we knew those funds would be available within the bond from other sources. And I think it's worth noting that the development of this site was covered by the sale of the Thomas Lane property and some School Plus fund balance. And so, as I mentioned, the board authorized some change in cost to cover the additional in there. And so with the approved budget, we came in $200,000 under budget. And I think the other real celebration in here is that we had a 1.26% change order rate. So, and basically what I'm saying with that is we had $175,000 in change orders on this project. If you compare that to the $9.5 million that we had in the general contract, and you divide that out, it gives us a 1.62% change order. That's really a remarkable change order rate. We had set aside $350,000 for change orders, and so we brought that in at under half of the change orders on this project. And I think that talks a lot about the project team from Architects West, the construction team, and it was a well thought out project. It was a well bid project, and it was there weren't a lot of things for us to consider in terms of changes or unforeseens that came up during the construction of this project. And so really something for us to highlight and celebrate is the completion of this brand new school for our district. In this project, alternates not accepted that we could still consider for future would be an outdoor classroom, and I know NEXA would still love consideration of that for their expeditionary learning. The Coeur d'Alene High School edition, the initial bids came in over budget, and so we took a look at the project and we ended up value engineering some portions of that project out. The primary one being the deletion of the 700 wing HVAC system, which is old and pretty decrepit in the district, definitely worth consideration for the future. There is an asterisk by there because we pulled $1.5 million out at the time of the construction, and that was the actual bid price for that project. Costs have gone up now. The current engineered valued estimate is about $2.2 million. That seems like a pretty steep increase, but I'm hearing from mechanical trades that costs have gone up just in the last 6 months alone, about 30% for plumbing, mechanical, based on steel prices, based on demand, based on supply shortages. There's a lot of factors behind that. And then there were some alternates not accepted in that project, replacing the VCT in the corridors, which polished concrete. Sound panels were not put in the gym, and installation of a TPO roof over the 700 wing was not accepted. Lake City High School edition, and if you remember, they received 11 new classrooms as part of that edition, with some new science classrooms that I know they love in there. Again, the bids came in over budget, so there was some value engineering that was taken out of that project as well. And things that we could still consider that were part of that value engineering were we deleted the repaving of the bus loop and modifications to the parent drop-off area. Some of those modifications have been made to the drop-off area, and we looked at some alternate means to cover those outside of the bond. And so really, for future consideration, it would be the repaving of the bus loop behind the school that's crumbling. We deleted the bleacher drive wheels. We are working to see if we can accomplish some of those with our maintenance staff. In fact, I think the wheels have been purchased, and we're going to try to install those ourselves with our maintenance team. We deleted 76 lockers, and we deleted the option of a multi-purpose classroom. And to speak to the multi-purpose classroom, we did reconfigure the library to give them a common meeting space as well. So we did do some work in there to give them a nice meeting area space for their staff, and worked with their administration to come up with an alternative, and we were able to do that during one of our summer projects outside of the bond. Alternates in this project that were not accepted were polished concrete throughout in a couple different places of the building, replacing carpeting. And again, some of that carpeting has been replaced by maintenance during some of our summer projects, a large portion of that being in the library, and we did that when we did that multi-purpose meeting space in the library as well. We redid all the carpeting in the library through alternate funds outside of the bond. Flushometers, those are basically a low flow flushing mechanism that goes onto the toilets. There's some energy efficiency savings there, but we weren't able to accomplish that portion of it in the part of the bond. And then some drinking fountains we were going to update and replace as well. Lakes Middle School, this project was a long time coming, and I think has been reworked a couple of different times over the years, and has been up for consideration for a number of different times as well. And for whatever reason in the past we weren't able to complete it. The initial bid came in much over budget, and so if you recall, we actually looked at rebidding that and looking at what we call the CMGC, Construction Management General Contract style of management on this project. We're able to meet with the architect and the engineer and look at some areas where we can maybe find some cost savings in the project, and took those out and essentially then kind of renegotiated a cost with the general contractor on it, as we considered all of those items that we were able to take out. One of them being we reconfigured the spec for the block and kind of redesigned that a little bit, and ended up finding quite a bit of cost savings there. But there were some other factors in that project as well. And I think if you were to reflect on the CMGC model that we use there, I think it's worth considering for future projects. Truthfully, it was probably a little bit more of a hybrid model because the project had already been bid once when we transitioned into that CMGC model of how we ran this project. But I think you could say we did definitely find some savings, and we're able to bring this into a budget where we're able to complete it. If you look at the original budget compared to the final costs, again, it was over budget, but with the board's authorization, we drew in some money from the bond interest and some of the contingency from other projects, and then we're able to complete this one. And again, this project was completed with all alternates accepted, and it was completed right on budget. So if you just kind of step back and look at this on a whole, we had a $35 million bond. The direct project costs came in at just over $35 million. So it shows that we were $200,000 over budget from the original bond. However, we know that there was interest revenue and some of the savings that we had from some of the value engineering that we pulled out. And that leaves a current balance right now of $1 million. And so that money is available to us for consideration of what we want to do next with that. And I'm going to give you guys a few slides to just kind of highlight some of the options of some different things we could consider for that. And again, this is more for information tonight. This is to get you to reflect on what we might want to do with that project. We're not asking for approval or consideration of anything tonight, but we're going to have a discussion here that we'll move into of some of the things that we could do. So this slide here is a summary of the different options and value engineering options that we took out. And so these are a reflection of what I just went through in each of the different bond projects. Just shows them all for you in one spot and what the values were. Again, I would note that each of the values listed in all of these were the value at the time that the contract was bid. So some of these have probably escalated due to rising construction costs and inflation. I took a look then at our deferred maintenance urgent needs, and so I ran a report from our Amoresco program that we have and said, okay, well, I wonder how this compares if I run that, what would come up on that one. And these were the top 12 needs that came up on that. And just to kind of give you a reflection on that, I know somebody asked a question earlier today to me that it might be worth noting here, the Atlas Elementary water supply. We're having problems holding water pressure at that school. And that's a pretty high price tag on that, but it would take quite a bit of engineering, redesign, construction, water line work, asphalt work, redoing that water line in there. So that is something that we need to keep on our radar and know that there's a need there. The Skyway Elementary sprinkler system, I would agree with how this report ran. In fact, we were out there on Christmas Eve because that sprinkler ruptured a line and we had to drain it down. And we had a couple guys out there late in the evening on Christmas Eve working on that sprinkler system. a small portion of that has been repaired and replaced, but there's still a pretty large portion of it that needs some pretty significant work. Ramsey water supply piping, that's some in-ground stuff below the school that would need to be replaced. Then you have a few smaller projects of water heaters. Some of these come up as really high urgent needs when you run the Amoresco report, because it asks you questions of, will this shut down a building? Is it life-saving? Is it a code issue? And so some of these things like a water heater come up as a pretty high need, even though those aren't a high dollar value in the grand scheme of the overall cost of the district. Canfield Gym does need a HVAC system replaced on that. We had one go out 2 years ago and replace that one, and we've been scabbing parts from that one to continue to work on the one that is existing on the second gym, the old gym. But that one is in desperate need of replacing. These ones in bold are ones that we did take out of the bond, so those were definitely items that we should consider for the future. Being the 700 building, the HVAC system. If you remember, I said we pulled out 1.5 million, but the current valuation, and I met with some mechanical engineers and the mechanical contractor that we use to get some current valuations. And so this is an estimate at the 2.2, but that's kind of what our current valuation of that project for the 700 building would come in at. Ramsey's walk-in cooler is in pretty bad need of repair. The 100 wing HVAC system at CHS is in pretty significant need of repair, as was the TPO roofing on the 700 building. And if you recall, that was an alternate that we didn't accept. An Atlas 3-tab roof is in pretty desperate need of replacing as well. And when I pare this list down to the top 10, these really are what come up when you run that list. But remember, right now our current deferred maintenance is $17 million. And so, to have $3.5 million reflected here, there's still a whole lot of needs across the district that aren't even reflected on this deferred maintenance list. And so again, these are in really no particular order, but I wanted you guys to see a summary of what some of the real critical needs across the district are currently as I ran that Amoresco report. So with that, I think I'll stop and see if you guys have any questions about this. But the good news is that we brought everything on time, on budget. I think that bond is something really to celebrate, to thank our community for supporting the school district, that we were able to accomplish an awful lot of projects across the district with the bond funds. So thank you to the community for that. And we have $1 million that we can still consider some future needs for as well. So I'll stand for any questions you would have.
Yeah, Jeff, I had a question. I know I had emailed you earlier, but early in 2019, you brought to our attention some security needs, upgrades, single point entry things that needed attention. And so we were able to complete projects at Lake City, Venture, and Woodland, but CHS was not able to be completed. I didn't see that listed in potential options for this money, utilization of these funds. Is that something that you could maybe present back to us? Because I know there were, a committee met and kind of went through ideas and options, and really the single point entry is something that has needed to be addressed there. Is that something that we could consider for these funds down the road?
I think it's certainly worth consideration for it. As you mentioned, there are still some needs at Coeur d'Alene High School regarding that. We were able to do a few things there over the summer with creating an office at the student entry over there where the campus security officers can now hang out. I think we could take that to another level with reconfiguring a little bit of that entrance in there to provide some additional security. That school will be a real challenge to do single point of entry, just based off of the overall design of it. I think there is a potential for that, but that's probably going to be large dollars for that, because it would be reconfiguring some classroom space to move office space and really reconfigure that school so that we have single point of entrance. But there certainly would be potential for even some steps or phases to get us there of secure entrances at the point of a main access via the student entrance or the main entrance. And I think the committee, when they met, had some ideas of things that we could consider for that as well. So certainly available for consideration as well.
It does seem, as stewards of taxpayer dollars, that we have an obligation to make sure security and safety are a prime priority. And so this is something I think needs attention. There's a couple entrances there that can definitely be improved. And, we talked in the $1 million range. And so I would just like to see what those options were and a summary again of that committee work. Go and get into the weeds of how we're going to spend this money, but I do think it's something to consider because it is our only school now that we haven't addressed these issues. And even if it's not the entire fix, if it's moving towards a solution that's in the best interest of our student community, I think that's important, especially in lieu of knowing that we're going to have to go to the community and make a request. And again, to ask for safety and security if we haven't prioritized it seems a little bit disingenuous moving forward. So I would just like to see what our options are to maybe remediate some of the concerns that we have at that school.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of different ways we can spend this money, and I think we all wish we had, another, 10 million that we could allocate to needs across the district. But, we know we have $1 million, and I think we can do some good work with that. But I think we all wish there were maybe a little bit more at this point. And I think that also brings up, future consideration for where do we need to go with HVAC systems and deferred maintenance and security upgrades and, consideration for future considerations through SPFLs or, where we need to go next with this as well.
Jeff, I want to thank you for the report. It is, as you guys said, a celebration that we have $1 million left over. And just going back, I think Tamara and I's first year on the board, either right before, right as we came on, the board had to transfer $1 million out of general fund to cover the 2012 projects. And so this is a nice position to be in. We have funds left over. We're not going to the general fund or the contingency reserve account of the district to fund these bond obligations. So it's great, and it's nice to have some options. I would agree with Trustee May. It would be nice to look at those security options again at Coeur d'Alene High and see what we can do. And then the other thing, as I look at that list, I'd want to focus on improvements that are kind of student focused and improving kind of the educational environment. Pretty hard to justify a sprinkler system, even though the need might be very high, and $20,000 seems pretty reasonable. But we know, for instance, HVAC at CHS has been a major problem, and you can have 20-degree temperature swings between classrooms in that 700 hall, I think. And so I'd look to start chunking some of that off for, any of those other projects that are kind of classroom centered that students are going to notice and staff are going to notice.
Yeah, and to address the Coeur d'Alene High School HVAC that you mentioned as well, if we were to consider the 700 wing, I think there's a couple options. One, we could allocate some funds towards that and say, okay, let's save these so when we have a little bit more money, we can do the project. I think there also is an option where we could maybe do part of the project and phase it in. So if you remember, or you probably don't know, but there's 7 different units that are multi-zone units on top of that building. And so it's possible that we could do a couple units at a time, and so phase that project in over time. And while it's not the whole thing that we would like to accomplish, I think we could at least maybe take some steps towards it as well.
Jeff, I had one quick question I forgot to ask at the time, and Katie might need to jump in on this, but is there a time frame that these funds need to be utilized? I know it's been a long project, and so Katie, I don't know if you're listening in, but isn't there an end date that these funds must all be spent?
Yeah, that is one thing I wish I had brought for tonight, but I can double check with bond counsel. I recall that the last time we checked, there wasn't any concern due to some loopholes. And now at this point, we've expended all of the proceeds from the sale of the bond, and we're working with interest revenue earned from having the bond funds in our district accounts. So I think that would also change it and take away the concern for violating the code on that.
Yeah, and if you could just let us know, I'd be curious. I was trying to rack my brain today and try to remember. I know you briefed us on this, but I couldn't remember the date, but that would be great. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you, Jeff, for second presentation tonight. And I guess I had just a quick question about prioritizing. I know you said your list didn't have any priority. We've heard from Trustee May and Trustee Morrisroe Do you anticipate prioritizing issues based on feedback from the trustees? Have you talked about a way to prioritize those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can have discussions about how we'd want to prioritize those, and you know, we certainly know that if we were going to prioritize the 700 wing, we don't have enough funding for that right now. But you know, that's for conversation, and you know, we heard a couple other things like safety and security come up tonight that we should give consideration to. So yeah, we can have further discussion about how to prioritize, and you know, I know within the needs of like what Amoresco presents, we'll have to strategize, and you know, some of that I talk to my maintenance team and talk about, okay, you know, what would you say are your guys' high priority needs based on how their resources are allocated or how they spend their time? Like, how often are they going out to repair and replace a certain piece of equipment? And you know, that certainly helps guide our priorities from a maintenance standpoint.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, the end is near. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Policies for information. Dr. Cook, was there any general presentation on these tonight, or was this just for information and for us to have a discussion if needed?
Chair Brumley, so these policies are updates as recommended by ISBA. Almost all of them deal with employment kind of action. We've got Kelly Ostrom, our HR director, is available if anybody does have any questions. I'm not sure that there's really much of a presentation. It's just these are the recommendations that came from the state, and I think most of them, if you recall, Title IX changes happened most recently, pretty substantial changes to Title IX, and many of these are connected to that. But Kelly is available if you guys do have any questions, you'd like to get any more specifics from her on this, and we would be bringing these back to you in February as well.
Okay, so I think probably the most efficient way is just to open it up to the trustees if you guys have questions. If it looks like it's going to get cumbersome and there's something on each one, we can narrow it down, but I'll just open it up to see if anybody has questions at all. Okay, Kelly, you hung out all night long and it paid off. Because if you hadn't been here, then we'd have questions.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sticking around and being available. These will be out for public comment for 30 days and then return back to us next month to see what individuals may have had in terms of comments, and we'll vote on them then, unless there's significant changes or there needs to be continued evaluation. All right, so last item is just our calendar dates, upcoming events. Our usual date for workshops is the third Monday, which is the 18th this month, but is also Martin Luther King. I work, I'm available, but I don't know about how everybody else feels about that. I think that was a question that our board clerk wanted to just pose to everyone and see if we wanted to move from that date. And then there are some topics for discussion. We've discussed the category update and maybe a possible levy update. And so first, I'll just ask about the date. Does anybody want to move the date?
I will not be available for the Monday for holiday.
Okay.
I'm available.
I can be available, but is that I know the buildings are closed that day. Is the district office open or closed that day? Do we know?
It's closed.
So it seems like we should avoid that day so they're not coming in on an off day.
Right. Okay. So then, knowing we're gonna have to move it, let's let Lynn send out some emails. I know there's been some difficulty today in scheduling some time, so do what you can to be as available as possible. So I've talked about, we obviously are going to need to meet to talk about a category update. So we'll really need to prioritize getting that set. A levy update is going to be important. Is there any other topics that any of you trustees would like to see?
Yeah, I emailed about this earlier today, I think. Maybe I didn't send an email off, but I'd like to, we've had a lot of emails really around parent involvement, I guess, in discussions at school. I don't want to get too specific, but I'd like to see us at least begin to have some discussion around policy about that. I don't think it is included in a policy, at least that I've been able to follow or to find yet. And I expect it could be a kind of a cumbersome conversation and process because it's not a complete black and white issue. There's statutes involved and privacy and different sorts of things, but would love to see us at least start the conversation, start figuring out what some of those issues are and see if we could develop a policy around really informing parents when I'm not even sure what the right discussion is, I guess, informing around counseling sessions or private conversations. I'm not sure what the caveat is, but maybe administration can help with that. But I think they have a general idea of what I'd be asking for, and I don't know if there's support on that or not.
I would support that. Trustee Morrisroe, I think we do need to have some discussions on policy, what policy, if any, and if not, developing policy on, at least at the elementary level, on counselors' responsibilities to involve parents, and what that should look like, and what this board feels is appropriate at that age level. And we know that there's an age of consent that starts in the middle and in the middle school level and into the high school, so it's not as applicable, although probably something still to know what policy and what this board would like to see from the counselors at all levels. That's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I also just want a better understanding of what teachers, counselors, all adults are required. Just maybe a review of mandatory reporting, what that looks like, and how parents are involved or not involved at times with those pieces, and kind of how that all fits together. Because I think as we dig into this, there's lots of layers.
So can I ask a clarifying question, trustees? What I'd like to make sure of is what we would be working on as a starting point. Or do we want to start specifically on parental rights as it relates to counseling, or do we want to start broader than that? Counseling services that we would be providing as a part of counseling activities that happen in schools, both at the elementary and secondary level. I fear a little bit if we try to get too broad too quickly, that it's going to get very cumbersome very quickly.
Yeah, that focus. Sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
No, I just think counseling is a very broad term, and I agree it needs to be narrowed down. I mean, counseling could be safety at home, many issues, and so I think we just need to be really clear so it's not overly broad. What we're inferring by counseling, I guess, and so I'm a little bit confused as to what that term we're throwing around counseling. But are we talking about private counseling, general counseling? Because school counselors at all levels do a lot of great work, and so is this policy specifically geared towards a certain type of counseling? I guess maybe that's what Dr. Cook is asking, because I'm feeling a little confused too because I think it could be too broad and it'll be very difficult to get to an endpoint that's in the best interest of parents and students and counselors.
I think for me that the issue is more the one-on-one based, and I don't know that you could just say that's counseling or just the counselor, because that could be one-on-one, from multiple adults. I think if you're talking disclosures or those sorts of things on any counseling, that could be difficult, right? Because our counselors are in the classrooms every day working with students, and they're not going to make 50 disclosures a day because they went to 50 different elementary classrooms a day or a week or whatever it is. So to me, the cusp of the issues around the individual session, but I don't know. I would see there's probably more questions than there are answers if we start taking this up, and it would just be kind of a jumping off point maybe to help guide us. What are the steps? What are we really looking at? What are we covering now, and what do we need to do? Whether that's more research or fact finding, sort of a thing. So.
Yeah, I think maybe what you're referring to, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's really the right to, or the obligation or duty to report, and whether you're reporting to a state, local entity, or to a parent. And so maybe we should start there on what is our duty to report to parents first and foremost, and to agencies. And maybe clarification on that would be a good starting point.
Yeah, I would think that should certainly be part of that initial discussion if that's what we choose to have.
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, do we have policy, which it sounds like Chair or Trustee Morrisroe and Trustee May have not been able to find anything yet. I see you smiling, Casey. And then, but then depending on the policy in place, then having the discussion of what are the obligations for disclosure that would be the expectation of this board, or the legal obligations, which is probably going to involve Megan in some capacity as to what's the mandatory reporting piece, which I think is pretty well covered most likely in policy. It's more the outside of the mandatory reporting requirements. Do we have anything? And if we don't, what's our expectations moving forward? Okay, so I'm going to leave it with Lynn to reach out to schedule the workshop, and I think it'll probably be 90 minutes. I think we'll probably need a half hour on each of these topics. Plan on that with a levy update, category update, and just an update on existing policy and some sense of discussion with the board of where we want to go based on that existing policy. Am I summarizing that accurately, everyone? See nodding. I can't see you, Trustee Moffitt. I'll trust your nodding. Okay, with that, do I have a motion to adjourn? Boy, you guys are moved. All right, and with that, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Thanks,
rest of your
y'all.
week.
Thanks.